Hello, all you scientists, and welcome back to the Science Behind That podcast. I'm your host, Atticus Hamilton, and on today's episode, we are going to be discussing fluoridation of water and why, despite what some people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. say, it is actually one of the most significant and beneficial developments in public health in the last century. So we're going to be talking about that today. So ladies and gentlemen, please grab yourselves a nice steaming hot cup of coffee, add a little bit of maple syrup to it, and sit on down, and we're going to jump right into today's episode.
Welcome to the Science Behind That with Atticus Hamilton.
And really quick, before we start talking today about the science behind water fluoridation, I want to talk about a really important issue with all of you guys that has been happening to me on YouTube, and that is censorship. So, ladies and gentlemen, I believe it is important for me to let you all know that I am being censored on YouTube. I uploaded a episode on Friday, which, for all of you that listen to my podcast on other platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, you guys got access to that episode. And it was a short episode where I was talking about the future directions of this podcast, considering the upcoming political climate in America. And it got taken down from YouTube. In that episode, I mentioned how certain people in the upcoming government administration believe very bad things about vaccines. And I can't say what these things are because otherwise YouTube is going to take me down again. And I'm sure all my listeners know what I'm talking about. But in that episode, I talk about why those ideas are ridiculous and how I'm going to do an episode on that on Friday. That video got taken down, and I got a warning from YouTube on community violations of medical misinformation. Now, I submitted an appeal to YouTube saying that I was debunking the medical misinformation of certain people, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., in the upcoming political government in America. And YouTube's AI, or whatever it was, reviewed my appeal and still said, no, it's taken down. And of course, YouTube then made me take special training on what is considered medical misinformation, even though I was debunking those false narratives. So, ladies and gentlemen, why do I bring this up to you? I bring this up to you all today because I think it highlights something about the times that we are heading into, which is times of censorship. And so there are certain things I can't say. Like, I can't explicitly say what this person believes about vaccines. And I'll tell you, they are completely false. Vaccines are, next to water fluoridation, the most important and the best medical advancement that humanity has made so far. And I will stand by that opinion. We have eradicated diseases because of our development of vaccines. But if I talk about that, and if I try and debunk these false narratives on YouTube, the video gets taken down. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm saying this primarily for my YouTube audience out there. I'm not sure how many episodes you will be able to access in the future on YouTube. And that's just a simple reality. And it hurts me so much to say that. It really does. It hurts me so much to say that because I understand why many of you listen to this podcast on YouTube, because not everybody has access to Spotify. or Amazon or anything like that. I think iHeartRadio is free, though. You can shoot me a text message using the link in the description below and tell me if that's true. But I think iHeartRadio is free. So if you do want to still listen to it and you can't access it because of the censorship I'm experiencing on YouTube, use iHeartRadio, or you can visit my website in the link down below in the description and access my podcast there. But ladies and gentlemen, the other part of this I want to mention is that despite this current censorship and whatever happens going forwards, I will still be uploading episodes because people need to get access to the truth and to the actual science of everyday life. And I'm positive that you all can tell that I'm fired up about this, because I am. Because it bothers me. It bothers me that when somebody that is trying to debunk the nonsense out there about science that people spew gets censored. It bothers me. But I don't want to turn this episode into a rant. I'm putting that out there for all of you to know. So, if you can, definitely check out some of the other platforms that my podcast is on. Spotify, Podcast, it's on Stitcher, it's on iHeartRadio, Amazon, pretty much everywhere you can listen to podcasts. The science behind that is there. So definitely check out those places as well as YouTube if you're concerned that you're missing episodes. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, today we're talking about water fluoridation because certain people in the upcoming administration have said that they're against it. And why are they against it? They're against it because of bogus science, and we're going to get into that. But our schedule for today, for what we're talking about, is first we're going to talk about what is fluoride. How does it prevent tooth decay? When did we start fluoridating water? Why are people against it? And this is probably the section that YouTube will get angry at. And then final takeaways. The final takeaway, I'll just give you an abridged version, is it is not bad. And to all of those people out there that think it is, 0.7 milligrams of fluoride per million is not harmful. It is not bad. It is one of the most important and significant public health advancements of this century. So no, ladies and gentlemen, it is not bad. It is necessary. And we're going to jump right into it. So what is fluoride? Fluoride is an element on the periodic table. Well, specifically, fluorine is an element on the periodic table. It is the ninth element on the periodic table. It is a halogen, and it is very, very, very electronegative. And what that means is it really likes electrons, so it likes to grab onto electrons. And so what's the difference then between fluorine and fluoride? Fluorine is the same thing as fluoride. It's just fluoride is usually a single fluorine atom. Fluoride is usually just a single fluorine atom. And fluorine likes to form bonds with other compounds. So calcium fluoride is a natural occurring mineral, also known as fluorite or fluorospar. It also forms sodium fluoride, which is used in water fluoridation and toothpaste. And that's what we're going to talk about right now, which is, now that we know what fluoride is, how does it actually work? So sodium fluoride is what they actually put in the water supply, and that formula is NaF, right? NaF, sodium fluoride, and they put that in the water supply. But how does that compound in concentrations as low as 0.7 milligrams per liter, how does that actually prevent tooth decay. So it's actually really interesting. So it does it in 3 ways. What it does, so the first way is it reduces enamel solubility. So when we talk about enamel is primarily composed of a compound called hydroxyapatite. And when I say primarily, it's like 96% of enamel is hydroxyapatite. And some of you may be like, well, Atticus, what is hydroxyapatite? Hydroxyapatite is the same mineral that is produced to form your bones. But your bones are more in the realm of like 60 to 65% hydroxyapatite. So enamel is 96% hydroxyapatite. And the production of enamel starts when your teeth are still in your jaw, when they haven't come out of your jaw yet. And the little baby teeth inside the jaw are surrounded by a thin layer of cells called amelioblasts. And these amelioblasts produce enamel. They produce hydroxyapatite. And so when we think about the structure of a tooth, right, you have your enamel on the outside and then your dentin on the inside, which dentin is still hydroxyapatite, but it's at a lower percentage. So it's more in the area of like 50%-ish hydroxyapatite. So it's softer. And so you have your enamel, your dentin, and then your root of the tooth where all your blood vessels and nerves are, right? And inside the jaw, the amelioblasts surround the dentin core of the tooth, and they produce this highly concentrated hydroxyapatite and form that enamel coating on the tooth. And then when the tooth erupts from the jaw, that amelioblast layer dies. It goes away. And so as the tooth is coming out, that layer of amelioblasts goes away. And so you're left with the tooth. And so what this means is, theoretically then, by the time your adult teeth come in and replace your baby teeth, if you never used like enameling toothpaste, if you never used that in your entire life, the enamel that is on your teeth when your adult teeth come in is the enamel you'll have the rest of your life. Now, what does fluoride do in terms of reducing enamel solubility? Well, the thing is here, hydroxyapatite is soluble, and it's soluble in slightly acidic environments. And so what fluoride does is it binds to the hydroxyapatite, and it converts the hydroxyapatite into fluoroapatite, which has a lower solubility than hydroxyapatite does. And so as a result, that, and I'm using air quotes, hardens your enamel, and it adds more enamel to your enamel, right? And it prevents tooth decay then, because you have a harder, stronger layer of enamel around the tooth, which prevents, plaques from forming. It prevents cavities from forming because it reduces the, area that bacteria could get into the tooth and cause infection. So that's number one. Number two is fluoride inhibits bacteria. And it also inhibits like Acanthamoeba gingiva. Acanthamoeba gingiva is an amoeboid organism that lives in people's mouths. And it's called Acanthamoeba gingiva because for a long time people thought it caused gingivitis, because in most people where you see that organism, they also have gingivitis. However, nowadays we don't really know what it does because it doesn't actually cause gingivitis. Gingivitis is caused by usually a combination of different microorganisms that infect that tissue. But fluoride kills off bacteria through a variety of different mechanisms, which I'm not going to get into because that's a whole nother episode. But it prevents plaque formation. It reduces plaque formation. And then 3, fluoride remineralizes tooth enamel. And we kind of already talked about that with converting it to fluoroapatite. But in individuals who, have teeth that are sort of decalcified from drinking like soda and very acidic beverages, fluoride serves to remineralize their teeth, which also prevents tooth decay, and it reverses the early stages of tooth decay. Because again, tooth decay happens when bacteria get into the teeth because of either cracks in your tooth or instability in the enamel layer of your tooth, right? And so that's pretty much how fluoride works. And so that leads us into the history of community water fluoridation, also called CWF. And for the rest of the episode, for simplicity, I'll refer to fluoridation of drinking water as CWF. In the 30s, a dentist in the Springs, Colorado Springs, named Dr. Fred McKay, discovered that the high levels of fluoride in the water supply in the town was leading to dental fluorosis, which is just simply tooth stains caused by high levels of fluoride. And then the same year, Churchill wrote to McKay after learning about the issue and asked him to do a further investigation of it. Now, why Churchill cared, I couldn't tell you. I would guess because the United Kingdom has a history of bad dental or poor dental health. But I couldn't tell you for sure. A couple years later, in like 1945, Grand Rapids, Michigan became the first community in the world to add fluoride to its tap water. And once again, when we say we add fluoride to tap water, we either add sodium fluoride, NaF, or fluorosialic acid, FSA. Both of those two things do the exact same thing in the water supply. And around the same year, between 1945 and 52, there were numerous studies that showed lower rates and instances of cavities in school children that were drinking this fluoridated water in Michigan. And because of these studies, that led to the spread of CWF to other towns and cities around the United States. And then eventually, come the mid-50s, the number of Americans that were actively drinking fluorinated water was around 13 million. And then by the 60s, 200 million Americans had access to fluoridated water. And then this is where the conflict starts, the 90s. So that's the history of water fluoridation. And before I get into this section, I want to say this for my YouTube audience. I support CWF. The evidence is there to support it. The research is there to support it. That being said, I'm still going to talk about the controversies, because without understanding the controversies, we don't understand, we won't be able to debunk it, right? We won't be able to debunk a controversy if we can't talk about the controversy. So, again, this is what other people and certain people of power believe, which is false. It's a false narrative. But in 1990, there was a National Toxicology Program study that showed an increase of osteosarcoma, which is bone cancer, in male rats that were given water that had high levels of fluoride for 2 years. And then that led to people being worried about cancer risk and sparked debates about the safety and the efficacy of CWF. So where does that lead us? Well, that leads us to Harvard. And I know all of you are like, that's a weird transition. It is, yes. But from that 1990s, so I want to preface something here as well. There was that study, that toxicology report in the 90s on rats, but up until that point, there were numerous studies amongst people, not laboratory animals, that demonstrated the benefit of CWF. And not just in the United States, in other countries as well. And despite that, people still think it is bad, which it isn't. But we'll get into it. So, in 2016, Harvard School of Public Health published a magazine that talked about, is fluoridated drinking water safe? And what they talked about in here was how there are many experts that question the basis for CWF. And they cite a study called the Cochrane Report. And the Cochrane Report was a meta-analysis. And for those of you that have been on this channel a long time, you know that a meta-analysis is simply it's like a review of research that has been conducted on a subject to see what the overall consensus is. And that's what the Cochrane Report was. It was a meta-analysis of studies on CWF. A lot of them were before 1975. What Harvard said the study concluded was that most of the studies were conducted before 1975 were deeply flawed. Okay, what does that mean? Well, the magazine here doesn't actually say what they mean by deeply flawed. And when you actually look at the Cochrane study, what they did was they set a standard control in a way that excluded 4,000 studies that showed a benefit to CWF from being considered in this meta-analysis. And I want to repeat that for you. The Cochrane's report's parameters excluded 4,000 studies that were in support of CWF. So if you exclude 4,000 studies that were in support, which, mind you, worked out to be about 96% or 97% of the studies surveyed. When you exclude that many, and most, if not all of them, are in support of CWF, what do you think the results are going to be? Well, the irony is the results were still positive, because according to the meta-analysis itself, it demonstrated that community water fluoridation reduced tooth decay in baby teeth by 35%, reduced tooth decay in adult teeth by 26%, and reduced cavities in children by 15%, or resulted in a 15% increase in cavity and tooth decay-free children. But the magazine entry here doesn't mention it. And so since that was published, there were letters submitted to Harvard School of Public Health by the American Dental Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and Harvard School of Dental Medicine, pointing out the flaw in this magazine and the flaw in the Cochrane's systematic review. And the other part of this is the magazine article said that it stated that there are no benefits in adults to CWF. However, the review itself that the magazine was based on did not make this conclusion. the conclusion it made was we did not identify any evidence meeting the review's inclusion criteria to determine the effectiveness of water fluoridation for preventing cavities in adults. And as we discussed, the inclusion criteria that was established for this review excluded around 4,000 beneficiary studies. So there's another part of this too, which and the point I'm making here is not to flame Harvard, because obviously Harvard's dental school came out against this Harvard publication, which I think is hilarious. The point of this is to pull out the pieces of evidence that individuals that are against CWF use and break it down and explain why it's bad. And it is this magazine op-ed that in most recent history has served as a big, and I'm using air quotes, piece of evidence against CWF. And that's the purpose here, is to break down why that's wrong. The other aspect here is in this article, it's countries that use fluoridated water and prevalence of tooth decay is compared with countries that don't use fluoridated water and their prevalence of tooth decay, and both show a downwards progression. Granted, though, the one that shows countries that use CWF, it's a much tighter curve downwards without many outliers compared to the one that doesn't use fluoridated water. There's another factor here, too. In the countries without fluoridated water, Austria and Canada are listed that don't use it. However, they do. They do use CWF. And then Sweden and Finland are also listed as not using CWF. And why do you think that is? They don't use CWF because their geology means that the water sources they get drinking water from already contain 0.7 parts per million of fluoride. So they don't need to add it because it's already there, which is also why we see a downward trend. Now, as for the other countries on this list that don't do CWF that also have a downward trend-ish, the reason for that is because of the rise of toothpaste that contain fluorine. And right now we're going into our, final takeaways, right? The final takeaway here is that it is an objective fact, and if this offends people, I'm sorry, but this is fact. It is objective fact that fluoride decreases tooth decay. It does. It just does. It's an objective fact. Now, I'm not saying, go to the store and down fluorinated salt. But in low concentrations, i.e. 0.7 parts per million or 0.7 micrograms per liter, it reduces tooth decay. So now you may be saying, well, Atticus, at what level is it unsafe? If you're ingesting greater than 1 milligram per liter, then you run the risk of dental fluorosis. Skeletal fluorosis, and remember, dental fluorosis is discoloration of teeth in the enamel. Now, skeletal fluorosis, that is when high levels of fluorine in the body cause hardened bones and brittle bones because they upregulate the production of hydroxyapatite. That doesn't occur until you're intaking 15 milligrams per kilogram of body weight of fluoride, which is insane, right? That is an extremely high level. If you take somebody that weighs 77 kilograms, 15 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, I mean, that's what, 1.15 grams? Nobody is taking 1.15 grams, which is 1,155 milligrams of fluoride. So the moral of the story here is that CWF works. And what we see in a lot of developed countries that don't do CWF is they either have fluoride levels naturally present in their water, or they use things like fluoridated salt right? Just like how you have iodized salt. That is for a reason. Certain countries like Hungary, Bulgaria, they don't have the infrastructure to do CWF, so they fluorinate their salt. So you take sodium fluoride, right? So at the sodium fluoride salt. So at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, the final takeaway is yes, CWF works. And as long as the levels of fluoridation are around 0.7 parts per million or 0.7 milligrams per liter, there are very few, if any, detrimental side effects of it. And the reality is it does help prevent tooth decay. And again, this appears to be one of those things. It appears to be one of those situations of a long-standing thing in medicine that has been proven to work, that all of a sudden there's controversy around, or there's concerns about negative side effects and blah, 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 blah. And sometimes that's valid, right? I mean, let's be honest, sometimes that's valid. In the 50s, arsenic was given to people as a medication. That is bad, all right? Yeah, arsenic is really bad. You know, Coca-Cola used to have cocaine in it, and it doesn't anymore. Why? Because cocaine is bad. But this is not one of those situations. This is not one of those situations. And ladies and gentlemen, especially for my audience here in America, I know that there's a lot of you elsewhere, UK, Canada, Germany, there's Belgium, there's a lot of you from Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, but at the end of the day, it works. Just like vaccines, it's safe and it's effective as long as it's done right. And it is. Now, if we were saying CWF in the United States is done with 1.1 milligrams per liter or 2 milligrams per liter, that would be a different story. But it's not. It's done with 0.7 milligrams per liter, which is safe and effective. So, ladies and gentlemen, as always, I want to say thank you for listening to this episode. It was fun to make, and I hope that you guys are walking away from this episode now with a new insight and ability to look at these arguments against this and say, no, that's ridiculous, that's stupid, here's why. You know, that argument doesn't hold water because of this. And at the end of the day, that's all my podcast is here to do, is not just, I don't just want to share information with all of you, but hopefully inspire you guys to look at the world differently. And remember, as always, stand up and question everything. Catch me if I fall.